So I've been wondering recently what is the best weapons from each Souls game. At first I didn't want to do this video because there are so many weapons in every Souls game, and you're crazy if you think that I'm gonna sit here and just, rank all the weapons from Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring just to see which is the best from each game. I'm sorry, but that would take a year off my life, and I'm kinda too lazy to do that shit. So what I'm gonna do instead is choose my favorite weapon from each of the game and trying to convince you on why, in my opinion, it's the best, even though there technically are better weapons than the ones that I'm gonna talk about today. Anyways, let's start with the one and only Claymore from Dark Souls 1. The Claymore is my go-to weapon from Dark Souls 1. It's been a while since I played the game, so I'm kinda going off of memory here, but from what I remembered, it did really good damage and enemies moved slow enough to not have to worry about calculating dodges properly, and we all know that the slower enemies means slower weapons perform better. Now with the Claymore, I did kind of made a mistake and infused it with lightning, and it was not doing a lot of damage, and I remembered struggling against Gwyn with it, but apart from that, the weapon itself is great and it does its job perfectly. Now, are there better performing weapons in the game? Yeah, sure, but I don't know, there's just something about the Claymore that's just fun as hell to use. Next up, we have Dark Souls 2, and for Dark Souls 2, almost all the weapons here does super good damage because, let's be honest, the bosses don't have that much health. You can literally blow on them and that alone will take a percentage of their health. By the way, I'm not saying that you have, you got hot ass breath or anything, I'm just saying. On my first playthrough, I used the regular rapier and it was doing a lot of damage, but I had an issue with it where every time I tried to kill a crystal lizard, none of the hits would land. But that's just common Dark Souls 2 bullshit. But my overall favorite weapon from Dark Souls 2 has to be the Ultra Greatsword. Yes, the Guts Greatsword. I don't know, I was just steamrolling all the bosses with it. I said I don't know, but that's a lie. This thing does so much damage, especially when you apply gold pine resin or whatever it's called, the lightning buff. Especially when you add that, because for some reason a lot of the enemies in Dark Souls 2 are weak to that. Next up, we have Dark Souls 3. Now my favorite weapon from Dark Souls 3 is going to be a bit boring. It's just the regular twin cell swords. I mean, come on, they do decent damage and they're fast, allowing you to calculate your dodges on time and do attacks without having to worry about, you getting interrupted in an animation or whatever. I know some people have different preferences, but for Dark Souls 3, this is just mine. The Zweihander is also a really good weapon, but come on, the cell swords are just too good to pass up. However, I do think that for some bosses like Midir, bigger weapons does better damage because, his head is his weakness and bigger weapons have better reach. But for bosses like the Nameless King, the cell swords perform wonderfully. Wonderful? I don't even know if that's a thing. Bloodborne. For Bloodborne, my favorite weapon is definitely the Pizza Cutter, but my second favorite is Ludwig's Holy Blade. But the Pizza Cutter is definitely my favorite due to how much damage it can put out with the Beast Blood Pellet, and also in my opinion it's one of the coolest looking trick weapons. I mean bro, it's a fucking saw and a mace, that's cool as hell. Now moving on to Elden Ring. Picking out my favorite weapon in Elden Ring was actually harder than I thought. I mean, at first I was gonna say the Scavenger's Curved Sword because, I mean, two-handed, it can shred a lot of bosses pretty easily. But then I played with the Greatsword and it was probably the easiest and safest weapon to play with, especially with the Giant Hunt Ash of War. I've even used the Giant Crusher and that was demolishing all the bosses in the game in less than a minute. But the weapon I've had the most fun with was definitely the Moonlight Greatsword, or as it's called in this game, the Dark Moon Greatsword. There is so much to love about this weapon. First of all, it does decent physical damage. It can also be buffed and cause frost buildup, which is one of the better status ailments in this game. But the best part about this weapon is the Charge R2, which shoots moonlight waves towards the enemies. This attack is really good because it doesn't use that much FP. Shit, it doesn't use any FP at all, and all you have to do is buff the sword and then you can use it as much as you want. And the buff lasts for a long time too, which makes it even better. I know a lot of people love to say that the Blasphemous Blade is better, which don't get me wrong, it's a great weapon that does a lot of damage, but the FP cost for the, Dark Moon Greatsword literally outshines the Blasphemous Blade. So yeah, I'll always choose the Dark Moon Greatsword over, the Blasphemous Blade any day. Still a good weapon though. And there you have it, my favorite weapons from each Souls game. Comment down below on what your favorite Souls game weapon is and be sure to like and subscribe. And also shout out to my Patreon members right here. And yeah, that's it. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day or night.